Luke Littler isn't just changing darts, he's tearing up the script entirely. He's 18 years old, he's already won a world championship, and he's doing things in darts that were once considered impossible. And yet, somehow, Littler has made it look easy.
I don't believe you, man. You can't joke on TV. Oh, no! This is amazing.
But is it? See, what makes this story different isn't just how fast he's risen, it's what's coming next. The records he's already shattered are just the beginning. The question isn't if he'll dominate the sport for years to come, but how long before he leaves every other name in the history books behind. And that's what we're here to break down. How did he go from a teenager playing in youth circuits to standing on the world's biggest stage, toppling legends, and redefining what's possible in darts? What's really driving his success? And is there anyone who can stop him? Stick around, because what happens next might just change the sport forever. Luke Littler was never meant to be a normal kid. Some people spend years figuring out their talent. For Littler, it was obvious before he even understood what talent was. By the time he was a toddler, most kids were still trying to colour inside the lines. Littler, he was already throwing darts, not just messing around, actually throwing. The story goes that at 18 months old, he picked up a magnetic dartboard and started launching darts at it. By the time he was 4, he had moved on to the real thing, and not long after that, he hit his first 180. That's right, while most of us were learning how to tie our shoes, Littler was out here, maxing out a turn in darts.
So how old when you started?
I think it was about 18 months in a nappy.
Now, if this were any other sport, you'd assume there was a pushy coach or an over-enthusiastic parent behind the scenes, drilling fundamentals into him before he even hit primary school. But there wasn't. This wasn't some engineered rise. Littler just played, for hours, for fun, without thinking about where it might lead. But there's a difference between being talented and being different. Plenty of kids are good at something early. Most of them fade away the second competition gets serious. Littler, he only got better. At 9, he entered his first tournament. By 10, he was already winning at the elite youth level. It didn't matter how much older the other players were. He had that look, the one that said, "I don't care who you are, I'm here to win." That moment was coming for Littler. And when it did, it wasn't just a test of his ability, it was a test of whether he was built for the highest level of the sport. For most players, the transition from junior dominance to the professional circuit is brutal. It's the moment when the game stops being fun and starts being a fight. A fight against expectation, a fight against pressure, and most of all, a fight against reality. Because for every prodigy who dreams of greatness, the harsh truth is that most of them don't make it. Littler, however, wasn't interested in most players. He didn't just win youth tournaments, he made them look pointless. At 13, he was already throwing 9 darters in practice. By 14, he was winning senior titles. Not youth division, not some developmental league, actual senior titles against players who had been grinding out a living in darts since before he was born. And this is where the first real question about him started to surface. Was he just riding a hot streak, overpowering lesser competition with sheer talent? Or was he something different, a player who had cracked the mental side of the game before he even had a driver's license? The early evidence suggested the latter. His reactions were minimal. His opponents, some of whom had been on the circuit for years, looked more nervous than he did, and that's where you saw the first real sign that Littler wasn't just another young talent. Because in darts, the biggest edge is psychological. But there's a big difference between performing in youth circuits, Super Series events, and smaller PDC tournaments, and doing it when the entire darts world is watching. That moment was coming, and when it arrived, it would define whether Littler was just another young star, or something the sport had never seen before. Littler's PDC World Championship debut wasn't just impressive, it was unprecedented. At just 16 years old, he entered the 2023 tournament as a complete wildcard. No experience at this level, no time to adjust, just straight into the biggest event in darts. Most young players use their first World Championship appearance as a learning experience. Littler didn't have time for that. His opening round match against Christian Kist set the tone. He averaged over 100, hit multiple 180 scores, and closed out legs like a veteran. By the second round, the darts world had started paying attention. Littler faced Andrew Gilding, a player known for his experience and steady game. It didn't matter. Littler dismantled him 3-1, playing with a confidence that made it clear this wasn't some lucky run. He was better than the people he was playing. Then came Raymond van Barneveld, a 5-time world champion, a legend of the sport, the kind of opponent that's supposed to be too much for a teenager to handle. Instead, Littler took the first 3 sets in dominant fashion and never looked back. Another win, another statement.
Create more history! What a performance!
By the time he reached the semi-finals, the story had already changed. Littler wasn't just a kid making a deep run, he was one of the best players in the tournament. He beat Rob Cross, the 2018 world champion, with an astonishing display of finishing. And then, the final, the moment that would define his tournament, Littler against Luke Humphries, the world #1. It started like every other match, but this time, the momentum shifted. Humphries dug in, found another gear, and slowly took over. Littler kept fighting, but for the first time, he was outplayed when it mattered most. A 7-4 loss. But that defeat did nothing to slow him down. He left Alexandra Palace as the youngest finalist in history, having broken multiple records along the way. Most importantly, he left knowing he could compete with the best in the world. And the next time he got to a final, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Littler didn't waste time dwelling on his loss in the World Championship final. If anything, it made him more dangerous. Most young players need time to recover after a defeat like that. The pressure, the media attention, the expectation, it wears them down. Littler, he came back even stronger. Within weeks, he was already proving that his run at Alexandra Palace wasn't a fluke. His first major statement came in the 2024 Premier League of Darts, a tournament featuring only the best of the best. No easy draws, no room for warm-up matches. He started as an outsider, a newcomer to the high-pressure, week-to-week grind of top-level darts. By the time the tournament was over, he had won the entire thing. Along the way, he hit a 9-darter on the biggest stage, showcased his ability to perform under pressure, and beat Michael van Gerwen in the final. It was no longer a question of potential. Littler was already one of the most dangerous players in the world, but he wasn't done. He followed up his Premier League win with victory at the Grand Slam of Darts, taking down more experienced pros with the same confidence and ruthless scoring that had made him a breakout star months earlier. By the time the 2025 World Championship rolled around, Littler was no longer the underdog. He was expected to win, and he delivered. The tournament played out differently this time. No longer a wild card, he was now the player everyone wanted to beat. Every match was a test of how he could handle expectation, how he could deal with opponents playing their best game against him. It didn't matter. Littler powered through the rounds, brushing aside world-class competition and booking his place in the final, again. This time, there was no slip, no missed opportunity, no what-ifs. He defeated Michael van Gerwen, the 3-time world champion in dominant fashion, sealing the title with a 170 checkout. 18 years old, youngest world champion in history.
His destiny to be world champ. The button has been passed. This generation's special talent beats the great Michael van Gerwen. Luke the Nuke Littler, the teenager, is champion of the world.
From teenage sensation to world #1 in barely a year. At this point, there was only one question left. Was this just the beginning of something even bigger? Winning a world championship at 18 isn't just impressive, it's game-changing. The youngest champion in darts history, the fastest rise the sport has ever seen. And the scary part? He was only just getting started. Littler wasn't just winning trophies, he was shifting the entire landscape of darts. First, there was the media explosion. After his historic win, he wasn't just a name in the darts world, he was a mainstream sports figure. Interviews, sponsorships, massive social media growth. His matches weren't just being watched by hardcore darts fans anymore, they were being followed by casual sports audiences, people who had never cared about darts before. And then there were the endorsements. He was bringing in sponsors who had never looked at the sport before. It wasn't just about Littler, it was about what he represented. Because here's the thing, darts, for years, has been dominated by veterans. It's been seen as a sport where young players take years, even decades, to develop into champions. Littler shattered that narrative in 12 months. And that shift had an immediate effect. More young players started picking up darts, more academy sign-ups, more junior tournaments growing in popularity. He had done what only a handful of athletes in any sport ever manage. He made it look possible for the next generation. But with all of that came something else. Something every dominant player eventually faces. When you go from being the underdog to the one everyone expects to win, the game changes. Every opponent starts preparing for you. Every match is a test of whether you can handle the mental side of being the player with the target on your back. And that's when the real battle begins. Because at some point, every great champion faces the question, how long can you stay at the top? For Littler, that test was coming sooner than anyone expected. Every era of dominance in darts has been shaped by a defining rivalry. Eric Bristow had Jockey Wilson, Phil Taylor had Raymond van Barneveld, Michael van Gerwen had Gary Anderson. The greatest players don't just win, they prove themselves against an opponent who can push them to their limits. For Luke Littler, that opponent was Luke Humphries. The contrast between the two made the rivalry even more compelling. Humphries was the measured, methodical technician, a player who had refined his game over years, gradually working his way to the top. Littler, on the other hand, was the unstoppable force, the prodigy who had skipped years of development and gone straight to the highest level. It was experience versus raw talent, discipline versus instinct, and most importantly, Humphries had already beaten him on the biggest stage. That win in the 2024 World Championship final was more than just a title, it was a psychological foothold. While the rest of the darts world was still adjusting to the fact that Littler had arrived, Humphries had already proven he could stop him. So when the two started meeting in major finals again and again, it wasn't just about trophies anymore, it was about control, momentum, the kind of rivalry where every match wasn't just another game, it was a statement. Littler struck first, beating Humphries in the 2024 Premier League final, making it clear that he had learned from their first meeting. But Humphries responded in kind, taking down Littler at the UK Open. They traded blows for an entire year, meeting in World Series events, the Grand Slam and the European Championship, each final fueling the tension between them. Every win mattered, every loss created more questions. The darts world had officially divided into two camps, those who believed Littler was inevitable, that he was the next Phil Taylor in the making, and those who believed Humphries was the only thing stopping him from total domination. But rivalries aren't just about results, they're about timelines. Littler was 18, Humphries was 30. One was just beginning his career, the other was in his prime, which meant the real question wasn't just who would win the next match, it was whether Littler's dominance was coming now, or if Humphries was simply delaying the inevitable. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that when a young phenom starts winning, at this rate, they don't just fade away, they take over. And if Littler was on that trajectory, Humphries might only be the first of many challengers who would have to figure out how to stop him. The only question left is, how long will it take before Littler is the one setting the standard for everyone else? Littler's rise isn't just about trophies, it's about rewriting the expectations of what's possible in darts. The old idea that young players need years to develop, gone. The belief that experience is the ultimate edge, shattered. In just over a year, he's done things that once seemed impossible. He's beaten world champions, lifted major titles, and handled the kind of pressure that has broken players twice his age. And yet, somehow, it still feels like he's just getting started. The next few years will define his legacy. Will he be a generational talent who dominates for decades, or will darts evolve to meet the challenge with new players stepping up to keep him in check? One thing is certain, whatever happens next, the game will never be the same again. Sometimes, not everyone plays fair. The history of darts is full of controversy, from suspicious tactics to outright cheating. If you want to see the darker side of the game, check out this video on the biggest cheaters in darts history. You won't believe some of the ways players have tried to bend the rules. Click here to watch.